Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you please tell us a little bit about you? Can you tell us your name, anything you wish to share to help us get to know you a little better?
Okay, so my name is Jim Coleman. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. I graduated from Second Ward High School, which was a segregated all-black high school in Charlotte. I graduated in 1965. Um, After Second Ward, I went to Phillips Exeter Academy for a year in New Hampshire. I graduated from Exeter in 1966. I went to Harvard University. I graduated in 1970. I was a teacher in Cambridge, Massachusetts, at a school for uh, boys. It was a school for kids who were having disciplinary problems in the public school system. Massachusetts paid to send them to private school, and when I was in college, I had been a tutor at the school for 3.5 years. So I took a job as a full-time teacher. Because of the war in Vietnam, I was classified 1A draft status. I joined the Navy JAG program and went to law school at Columbia. When I graduated from law school, I clerked for Judge Damon Keith in Detroit, federal judge. And while I was clerking, the Navy decided they had too many lawyers, so they allowed me to basically be honorably discharged. Excuse me. And in order to do that, it took them 60 days to process me. So I was on active duty for 60 days at the Philadelphia Naval Yard.
Excellent. So let me ask you, we know each other through our work at Duke Law.
Yep.
What you are mostly known for is the Innocence Project, helping people that have been wrongly incarcerated find their freedom. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So what we do is to investigate cases by people in North Carolina who claim that they were innocent, but nevertheless convicted of very serious felonies, murder, rape, and put in prison for very long terms. And in some cases, they're given life sentences without the possibility of parole. We investigate the cases. When we started out, I don't know, about 9 years ago, we started out as a seminar, and Teresa Newman and I basically turned it into a clinic without permission. So we were teaching a 2-credit seminar, but we decided that the students would get more out of it if they actually investigated cases. So we had them investigate cases. Eventually, when David Levy became the dean, we turned it into a clinic, and we continued basically to do the same thing. We have freed 8 people who were convicted of, as I said, serious crimes, most of them convicted of murder. We convinced either the prosecutor or a court that our clients were innocent, and they were released from prison. Our oldest client was 82 when he was released, and he was in prison for over 43 years. We've not added up the total number of years that our clients spent in prison, but it's well over 100.
Wow.
and we continue to investigate cases. A lot of our cases now, though, when we started out, we were able to convince prosecutors to work with us. If we had a client we thought was innocent, they were willing to listen to our evidence. A few years ago, the prosecutors in North Carolina decided that they no longer wanted to do that. So as a result, we have to go into court now and file what's called a motion for appropriate relief. So that's what we do, and that has become the focus of our clinic. We are more of a litigation clinic now than an investigative clinic that we were in the beginning, because the cases take so long to investigate that we don't take on a lot of new cases that frequently. We have about 3 cases that are actually in court now at different levels. One in the United States Court of Appeals in Richmond. The full court heard the case, and we're waiting for a decision. We have two cases in Superior Court in North Carolina.
Okay. I'm going to ask you 3 questions that are somewhat related, but not. When Bill Clinton was president, he implemented the 3 strikes rule. Mm-hmm. What exactly does that mean? And is there any remediation from that if you've been put in prison as you violated the 3 strike rule, according to what the law says?
Yeah, well, Bill Clinton, I'm not sure that Bill Clinton actually introduced it. Other states had already adopted it, California being one of them. What it does is it says that if you are convicted of 3 felonies, and they're supposed to be violent felonies, then upon the conviction of the 3rd one, you are sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. One of our colleagues, Erwin Chemerinsky, argued a case in the Supreme Court out of California, where the person was, the 3rd strike was the person had stolen a cassette tape from some department store, and that was his 3rd felony. And he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, and the Supreme Court upheld the conviction. So yes, it is a very serious conviction, and if the sentence is life without parole, then it's life without parole unless the governor grants clemency.
Okay, so my next question is this: what is criminal justice? What is, when we hear that word, what are we really talking about?
So the way that we deal with safety in our communities is we rely on the police, and in cases where an individual has committed a crime, we have a court system and a prison system. The person under the Constitution is entitled to a trial by jury. If the jury convicts the person, a judge sentences the person according to a sentence that the legislature has established. And then the person is committed to the correctional institution, where he or she serves out the sentence. the Constitution, when it abolished slavery, it made an exception for persons convicted of crimes. So in effect, the prisons are very hostile environments. They make no effort. Most of them make no effort at rehabilitation, and instead they simply warehouse people who are convicted for the duration of their sentence.
Okay. My third question is about people who are able to get out of prison or out of jail, and they have to pay
Mhm.
restitution.
Mhm.
As I have read over time, that people are put back in jail because they're unable to pay that restitution. Is that a part of the Constitution? Is that state law? Where does that fall in the criminal justice system?
It's state law, and it's actually something that there is a movement to try to reduce the extent to which people are charged fines and penalties when they are convicted of crimes. Because what happens often is that people who are convicted of crimes and put in prison are often poor, and so they can't afford fines and fees, but nevertheless they are charged these fees and fines, and it becomes crippling debt for most of the people who are in that situation. In Ferguson, Missouri, for example, when it was in the in the news, they did a investigation of the police department, and one of the things that they found was that the police department in Ferguson was using fees and fines of poor people in order to finance the city. They were dependent on these fees and fines, and so they were arresting people as quickly as they could for any kind of minor offense, charge them with penalties, and then basically it was a tax on poor people. So the Constitution allows it. There are some provisions of the Constitution that could be violated with excessive fines, but generally courts have not found any penalties to be excessive.
Interesting. So when we look at justice, there's always a woman with a blindfold on and she's holding scales.
Yeah.
And that symbolism supposedly means that justice is blind and evil.
Correct.
Is it?
Yeah. It's neither blind nor is it balanced. I think you don't have to look very deeply to see how flawed our system is, and it's actually weighted against poor people and people of color. They are charged more frequently. They are charged with more serious crimes. They are sentenced to longer punishment. And the evidence used to convict them is less often than the evidence that would be required to convict a white person of the same crime. In addition, our system is supposed to depend upon a jury of one's peers, but in serious felony cases, for example, in murder cases where the death penalty is a possible punishment, prosecutors often will try to eliminate Black people from the jury so that they are tried and convicted by either an all-white jury or a jury that will perhaps have one Black person And usually the person they would leave on would be somebody who is not likely to stand up against 11 white jurors who want to sentence the person to death.
Jim, that's such a sad, sad thing to hear. But let me ask you a question. Your name is Jim Coleman. You are well known throughout the world for your work. Have you ever felt unsafe?
Unsafe in what way?
You're a physical person. A police car rolls up on you, or you're in a setting where, I mean, anything where your person is possibly could be harmed.
Yeah, I mean, I've not had the experience of people who have ended up being shot, but I've certainly been stopped by police officers in circumstances that I thought were suspicious. You know, when you grow up, when I grew up, you know, we were cautioned about dealing with the police. And so I've always tried to be careful when I'm dealing with the police. I've been pulled over. I remember once I was pulled over on Interstate 40. I was coming home from Wilmington, and my wife and daughter were in the car with me, and I was stopped for speeding. And the guy who stopped me was a total jerk. And it was clear that, you know, he was going to be confrontational. He made me get out of the car and come and sit in his police car while he wrote the ticket. Totally offensive. And, you know, and I knew if I had said something that it would just go downhill. So I didn't. But as I've gotten older, and as I have, you know, become more prominent, I have felt less inclined to simply take, you know, that kind of stuff from police officers or prosecutors or judges. And you know, but I still run into prosecutors who are offended if they think I'm talking back to them, because, you know, that's not what they expect. Same with police officers. I don't feel threatened these days by that, because I doubt that you know, they would do anything to me. I do worry about my sons, though. So, you know, we have lived in a predominantly white neighborhood in Durham. And, you know, they're kind of free spirits. They play tennis. We were members of the, when they were growing up, we were members of Hope Valley Country Club. And they would go with their friends at night and play tennis. And I would be worried about them. I would be worried that, you know, somebody would call the police as they're walking through the neighborhood, coming home. Sometimes, you know, I know that my older son he and his friends would go down to the country club and climb up on the roof of the tennis clubhouse and drink beer. And only, I just could see a situation where, you know, they would come. They would be called out and they would focus on my son, and you know, something bad would happen. My sons have been stopped only once, where I thought they were stopped because of their race, and that's when they drove into our neighborhood, and the cop pulled up behind them, lights flashing. What I always tell them is that if they get stopped, to call me. Tell the police officer they want to speak with their lawyer, who is also their father. And they called me, and it turned out that they were about 3 blocks from our home. So I told them to tell the police officer that I was walking down to where they were. Mm-hmm. And this cop claimed that they had stopped them because the the light, the back light was out on the car. Well, this is a car I had just purchased. So, but what they do is they make him turn off the car, right? And he stopped behind him. And so, I said to the officer, "What's the problem?" He said, "Well, I saw them, they drove in and their parking light was out." I said, "Sir, I just bought the car. There's no chance the light was out." He says, "Well, I'm just going to give them a warning this time, and just be careful." And he walked back to his car and he got away, and then turned on the lights, and obviously the light was not out. That's the only experience that we've had since we've been living here. But again, that's the kind of situation that could go downhill quickly, and I worry about that more for them than for myself.
Yeah. Well, and I share that same fear. I have two children. I have both of them are adults. I have a 40-year-old daughter and a 21-year-old son. And my son goes to school in Greensboro. He goes to Greensboro College, a small Methodist college, private college. And it's 48 miles from my front door to the front door of his school. And the minute he gets in the car to drive, I start praying. And I pray all the way.
Yeah.
He sends me a text or calls me and said, "Mom, I made it." So yes, I absolutely understand that. A couple more questions, and then I'll give you the floor to say whatever you want. But what does the rule of law mean?
So we say that we are a country that respects the rule of law. And what that means is that our relationships with each other are governed by law and not by personality, and that no person is above the law. So, the poorest citizen is able to demand justice from the richest citizen. You can sue them in court. You can demand that they answer to the law. The law is neutral, and it's not supposed to favor any citizen. I think that's being challenged these days. I don't think Donald Trump cares about the rule of law. I think he has an attorney general who doesn't care about the rule of law. And, when that happens, then force becomes the basis for enforcing whatever order, rights, and not law, and which means that it's no longer equal justice. It then becomes, whether you're in favor with the person who can exercise authority. But we say, and we say with pride that we respect the rule of law, but I think that has greatly degraded over the last few years.
Okay, so this is my last question. 8 minutes and 46 seconds, Mr. Boyd. We've had these things happen for, even going all the way back to slavery, that black and brown lives were expendable.
Right.
The thing that stood out to me most was something that happened in 1998 when James Byrd Jr. had a rope tied around his neck, was drugged behind a pickup truck till he was decapitated.
Right.
Another form of lynching. But what we saw in 8 minutes and 46 seconds with Mr. Boyd, what were your thoughts about that, and how did you process what you saw?
Well, I think that, and I've told friends that I thought that something significant happened in that 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I think that a lot of people who basically had been willing to kind of, move on from these atrocities, found it very difficult watching a guy die with a police officer, kneeling on his neck, and him calling out for his mother and telling them that he can't breathe, and they just stood around. I think it was, witnessing the death of a person uh, so casually carried out by police officers. I think I personally, felt a rage about it. And to the point where, I felt that if we don't do something about this, I could see total chaos in the country because, one of the things that I think has kept America together is that Black people have been willing to basically take this stuff in the hope that eventually the country would treat them with respect and with justice. But I think that, there's a limit to a people's patience. And I think that we may have reached the limit watching Floyd die. It was no longer possible for anybody to justify what happened to him, to argue that, the police officer was in danger and, that this was a justifiable homicide. That none of that, it was just totally stripped away. And, I felt that, I felt the rage that a lot of people felt about that. And what's been different is that, particularly for the younger generation of Americans, they saw it too. I think people, you look at what's happened in the military, I think people realize that, this is really, you can't just walk this back. You got to do something. And it's been great, to see, people calling for, dismantlement of these, Confederate monuments, the military banning the, symbols and flags on military facility. I mean, we should have done this. Well, first of all, it should have never happened. But the idea that somehow, we should be subjected to this kind of racism, these symbols, and that somehow that's part of our heritage. I mean, these are people who, were traitors and tried to destroy the country in order to preserve slavery. So why are we honoring them by naming military bases, and why do we have monuments of them on courthouse grounds? I think, people who are in a position to do something about this stuff figured that out and decided that they better do something this time, because there's a real danger that people have kind of their patience, reached an end, and that we want to see real change this time.
One last question, forgive me. How have your white colleagues talked to you about this experience? Have you heard, have they called to see how you are? Have they checked on you to make sure that you are in a good space mentally and emotionally? Have you found that colleagues, friends of other races have been supportive and shown you any outreach?
Yes, I mean, people who actually know me, people I consider my friends, but they haven't been in touch just because of what's going on. I mean, they're always in touch with me, and I prefer that. I mean, I actually, resent a little bit. I shouldn't, but I resent a little bit people I don't know, calling me and sending me emails and asking me how am I, and it's like, what do you mean? How am I? I've been dealing with this stuff all of my life, and so I'm fine. I shouldn't resent it, but I do on some level, if I'm honest. One of the things that I'll mention this. I know a lot of our Black students of color, You know, some of them, you know, feel that they're not wanted at the law school. They feel that, you know, people behind their backs question whether they should be there. You know, I have never done that ever. And, you know, I know that I've not always been the most, you know, accomplished student. You know, I certainly didn't have the best test scores when I got into Harvard or when I got into Columbia, but I never questioned whether I should be there. And I always have said to my students, you know, once you're there, you're there. Forget about how you got there, because I guarantee you, you can't figure out why a lot of these white kids got here either. And the idea that all of them are brilliant, you know, so don't sell yourself short. Um, I don't like dealing with trigger warnings and focusing on microaggressions. I know that stuff happens, but you know, we have to be tough, and we have to focus on the big stuff that matters, and not, because people, you know, it's very easy for them to say, okay, well, we'll give you trigger warnings, and you know, we'll do this stuff that in the long run will have absolutely no impact on anything that's important. And when our students get out of law school, you know, they're going to go into a world that don't give them trigger warnings, where they're going to have more than microaggressions. And we need to train them and help them to be tough to deal with that stuff. So, you know, all of this, people kind of weeping all over themselves about, you know, what's going on now and all of that. You know, I would prefer that we kind of figure out what needs to be changed, and let's change it, and not sit around kind of contemplating our navels and talking about, you know, love and all of that. I mean, you know, that's great, but let's kind of figure out how to make it better.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jim, for having this time with me. I can't tell you how much I admire you and your accomplishments. I've seen posters around the law school of people you freed, and I stand in awe. And I pray safety for you and your family, and continued good health and all of those kinds of things. And I hope we stay at the law school until I'm not there anymore, because it's wonderful to see your face sometimes as we're passing each other in the hall, just to say a few words. So
Yeah.
when this recording ends, I will send you a copy so you can view it. And if
Okay.
you agree, we will upload it. If you disagree, we will not. And if you want to do over, or you want to have something else you want to talk about, we can do them as many times as you want to.
Well, you know, I can authorize you to upload it now, at your discretion. I don't need to review it. I would like to have a copy of it, but I don't
I
need
will.
to review it.
I'll send you a copy of it. I absolutely will
Okay.
send you a copy of it. I have to figure out how to send it, because it's too large to go through email. So you use
Yeah.
Box or Dropbox? Which one of those you use?
Dropbox.
Okay, I'll send it to you through Dropbox.
Okay.
So
That's
thank you
good.
again. Stay well.
Okay. You too. Take care.
Continue the fight.
I will always.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jim. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.